Welcome to Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and today's featured patron who brings you this episode is Jeff Lucas. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Today we're going to be talking about the Segway. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about the hype that preceded the Segway, Tony.
I definitely bought into this when I was in middle school. I was like, it's going to be amazing.
You are going to love this episode. I also perused many web articles related to the Segway. I remember reading about it in Popular Science, of all things. So, for those of you who are starting to get older these days, you might enjoy this little kick back to the past.
When was this? Like early 2000s?
The Segway ends up getting released in 2002. The first wave of speculation hits in January of 2001. Dean Kamen's number one concern about his invention was secrecy. He believed his new transportation device, codenamed Ginger, had the power to change the way the world worked. And if the evil auto companies got their paws on this technology, they would do everything in their power to shut it down forever.
That's some ambition right there. That's belief in your invention.
And it's worth remembering that Dean Kamen has some reason to believe in himself as an inventor. He's already invented several reasonably successful things. The thing that precedes the Segway is a wheelchair that operates on somewhat similar technology. It's not balanced all the time, but it had the ability to go up on two wheels and balance. And so Dean Kamen is coming into his development of the Segway as a real inventor. He's not one of these crackpots in a garage who's yelling about how the auto companies are going to try to scan his brain.
Because he found the one way that the machine can run off of water.
Correct. This is not that kind of thing. The pitch for the device that would eventually be known as the Segway went something like this. People need to move around. And nearly everyone moves around by walking at least some of the time. But walking is slow, and it takes a lot of work. So what if there was a device that would do your walking for you? It could make basic human movement faster and easier in the same way that the computer had made data manipulation faster and easier. So obviously, the big auto companies would like to keep this kind of revolutionary tech suppressed. And Dean Kamen wanted to keep Ginger under wraps until he was ready to unleash it on the world. But Dean also knew that future generations were going to want to know the story of the machine that changed the way we move.
Yeah, the one that entire cities would be changed for.
This is not something that only Dean would say, but we'll get into the other people in this story in a little bit. Right now, we're just going to introduce a new character named Steve Kemper. Steve Kemper was a journalist, and he had worked with Dean Kamen before. He had covered some of Dean Kamen's inventions in the past, and so Dean comes to Steve and he says, listen, I know you know me, I know that you're not going to blab this. So here's the proposition. I'm going to show you my cool new invention. I'm going to let you be in on every step of the process as we develop it. You are going to be there to watch everything as it happens, but I'm not going to pay you. And you're not allowed to tell anybody about this until the device is ready to be released, including not doing any book proposals. So you're going to work for free. Eventually, you're going to get a big payday because your book is going to be amazing and everybody's going to want to read about the Segway because it's going to change the world. But right now, you're going to have to figure out how you're eating and stuff because no money for you.
Was it really that time intensive, though?
I don't know. I didn't get a sense of how much Steve Kemper was on hand. He definitely relates some of the meetings that are going to happen between the key players from the first-hand perspective. So Dean Kamen, I assume, would call him up and say, hey, listen, Steve Jobs is coming down. Spoiler, Steve Jobs is going to be in the story. He's going to look at the Segway, come and chronicle this meeting. I don't know if he was there every day, if he was sort of in the trenches taking notes from day to day, trying to figure out what was going on. Maybe he was doing that and he was able to do some other journalism. There's some stuff about the details of exactly how Steve and Dean's life would go at this point that I couldn't tell you definitively, but it's not the most important detail of the story. So Steve Kemper agreed to be part of the project, and Dean Kamen showed him the device that would eventually be known as the Segway. From all accounts, at this point, it was basically the same machine that would eventually launch in 2002. Venture capitalist John Doerr was invested in the Ginger already, and he told Dean that he had some more big names from Silicon Valley interested in the project. Names like Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs.
It's pretty heavy hitters.
Yes, although Bezos was still in the infancy of Amazon. It's clear from the way the book is written that everybody knew it was a success, but even then I don't know if people understood exactly how successful it was still going to be. Dean Kemper, though, was reluctant to let anyone else in on the game. He understood that the more cooks you had in the kitchen, the more potential there was for the secret to get out, and the more you were sort of diluting your vision and giving power to other people. If these guys invest $50 million into your project, they're going to want to have some say-so, and Dean Kemper really wanted to do a lot of this on his own. But eventually, he does give in, partly because these guys already have such big names. It's not so much the money, although that is a factor, but also the fact that if Steve Jobs is advising you on your project, he might have some really useful things to say.
Also, he probably has a record of being discreet for his own company, so you can kind of know that he's not going to just go blabbing about it.
Yes, as far as we know, when this leak does come, and we still don't know to this day who leaked it, but I feel pretty confident it was not Steve Jobs.
It's probably some engineer that wasn't getting paid enough.
It was not. I can tell you for sure it was not, but we'll get to that in a little while. Jobs and Bezos proved to be a mixed blessing for the Segway. On the one hand, both men really liked riding the thing. Steve Jobs reportedly kept kicking people off so that he could get more riding time. And this was an interesting little thing that just kept popping up in the story. Whenever people are riding the Segway, they're just having a great time. And in addition to enjoying riding the Segway, the praise that Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos heaped on this machine was nearly hyperbolic. As far as what they thought the potential of it was, Steve Jobs is quoted as saying that the device could be a bigger game changer than the PC, and John Doerr, the investor that was in on this before Steve Jobs and Bezos, said that it could be bigger than the internet. So these are weird quotes, especially the Steve Jobs one. I'm a little bit shaky on exactly where the attribution comes from. I looked through the book that contained the source of a lot of these quotes, and I have a suspicion that the author of the book doesn't have a direct quote from Steve Jobs on the bigger than the PC thing. I think that's something that Dean Kamen told him that Steve Jobs said, and that doesn't mean that Steve Jobs didn't say it, but
it's a little sketchy.
It's just not slightly off. I don't have a recording of Steve Jobs saying this is going to be bigger than the PC. And on the other hand, there is eyewitness accounts of Steve Jobs. And on the other hand, there are eyewitness accounts of Steve Jobs ripping the Segway a new one for a whole host of reasons. First off, he hated the design. He thought it was ugly, that it wasn't inspiring, that people were just going to look at it and think, oh, what? This is not that interesting.
For anybody that hasn't heard of the Segway, could you give a brief example of what it is?
Oh, wow. I just assumed everybody would know what it was.
There's probably some younger listeners that are 14 that have no reference point for this.
I mean, they do still exist. Have you guys seen Paul Blart Mall Cop? You know that thing with two wheels that he rides around on? The Segway was essentially a scooter with large rubber tires but they weren't front and back like you would think of like a scooter that you would ride around on normally. They were side to side, and there's a T handle that comes up sort of from in between your legs, and then you grab it with your hands, and you just lean forward just a little bit, and there's a bunch of little mechanisms inside that sense the very, very slightest motion of your body and interpret that into directions to the device. So literally, if you think about moving forward, your body just does the slightest little shift forward, and the Segway's like, all right, here we go. Whoom.
Yeah, and it's basically stabilized by a bunch of gyroscopes. It's really cool how it stands on its own, but it's not cool enough to do any of the things that it's talking about.
So, in addition to the design of the Segway, which Steve Jobs hated, he also had a lot of concern about how the device would be launched. He asks a lot of questions about how quickly they're going to launch, and Dean Kamen says, well, maybe we'll just launch over in Singapore or something and then have a slow rollout. And Steve Jobs says, no, the internet killed that idea. Everybody's going to hear about it and want one, and if you're not on top of this, somebody's going to steal your design and make one for themselves. Dean Kamen said, that's not possible. I have amazing technology. And Steve Jobs says, yeah, it is. People are really good at ripping off your amazing technology that it took you 10 years to develop.
Yeah, it's like China's entire economy is based off of that sort of theft.
Yes, well, that'll come up later, Tony. The other thing that Steve Jobs brought up in these meetings was that if someone hurt themselves on a Segway and it wasn't widely enough accepted, that would severely damage the public image of the device. So if everybody had a Segway and one person gets hurt on it, well, that's not such a big deal, right? We deal with the fact that there are car accidents and still own cars. But if it's a new thing and not very many people have one, and then it kills somebody or mangles their leg, then it's a problem for your thing you're trying to get everybody to buy so it changes the world.
Yeah, it's like one video of the Reliant Robin falling over and just skidding somewhere because it's not enough wheels. All of a sudden, everybody's against it. Or what did we do, the Sinclair C5?
This will actually be directly compared to the Sinclair C5. When it comes out, people are like, yeah, we remember when this was called the Sinclair C5, and we remember that it didn't work out that well for that device either. So almost exactly the same kind of pattern. Jeff Bezos wondered if the Segway would even be allowed to exist in cities, because surely someone would try to regulate the nearly 300-pound scooter zooming down the sidewalk at over 12 miles an hour. But if Dean Kamen could control the launch, if enough people bought enough Segways fast enough, most of these problems could be overcome. Sort of like the move fast and break things. You're going to have way less problems with city ordinances if there are 8,000 Segways in the city already. If you just have 2, the legislature in the town is not going to have such a big problem saying, yeah, we don't like that thing.
It's like those little Lime scooters and everything now. It's just they're everywhere.
Yep. And then came the leak. In January of 2001, the website inside.com, which is no longer existing in the form that it was in 2001, published a story about a new invention from Dean Kamen known only as IT. Capital I, capital T. The source of the story was a leaked book proposal from Steve Kemper outlining the most hyperbolic reactions of Kamen's big-name investors and stating in the vaguest possible terms what the device could accomplish. So Kemper kind of goes outside of the realm of his agreement with Kamen, but he's still interested in secrecy. He wants to sell a book. He probably needs the advance, although I don't know this for a fact. I'm speculating on that part. But
in the worst case, he wants the advance. It's what journalists do, like whenever they've got a big story.
And one of the things that makes this a big story is the fact that he does, in fact, get an advance of $250,000, which is used as proof that this must be a big thing. These people bought this book not knowing anything about this device. We don't know anything about this device either. This device must be amazing. The question, what is it, set the internet on fire. The itquestion.com, a website devoted to solving the mystery, got 100,000 hits in a single day when it launched, which is pretty good for 2001 internet numbers on a single day. I'll take 100,000 hits on one of our videos in a single day. Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Speculation and conspiracy theories ran wild. And I will read now a quote from the book Codename Ginger by the aforementioned Steve Kemper. Quote, "The public was hungry for a technological miracle. People transformed Ginger into a device for time travel, teleportation, or magnetic levitation. They imagined a hovercraft, a jetpack, and an inertial thruster, based on the acronym IT. A writer in Thailand foresaw a flying super tuk-tuk. After the terror of September 11, 2001, a rumor started that Ginger had been covertly deployed in Afghanistan to defeat Osama bin Laden."
Oh, I would love to see that. Although I think there are some special forces units that use Segways now.
Okay.
Because they're so stable that for like riot type stuff, you can actually ride them forward while firing and have it be a stable platform to move you forward while you're taking good shots.
Okay, good to know. I would love to see that. The raid on Segways. Because they're sort of associated with silliness a little bit, right? Like, you know, it's mall cops and maybe like local police riding around so they don't have to walk. Maybe your mailman. It's like, it's the kind of thing that an authority figure, but not very high up the chain, would ride around. So the idea of like
special forces riding Segways.
Yes, green berets and stuff riding around with their guns. That's a great image. Dean Kamen naturally was horrified, both by the breach of secrecy and by the rampant speculation about his device. They say all publicity is good publicity, but in this case, Dean knew people were overselling themselves on the Ginger. Once teleportation and time travel had been mentioned, even jokingly, his weird-looking scooter that balanced on its own was going to look pretty weak by comparison. He fired Steve Kemper from working on the project, and Steve Kemper had to finish the book without any direct sources, but the damage had already been done. Jeff Bezos, on the other hand, made hay while the sun was shining by offering pre-orders for it on the front page of Amazon, despite the fact that no one knew exactly how much it would cost yet.
That definitely sounds like a Bezos move.
Just puts it up there on the front page like, you can buy it now, pre-order. And people did try to. Those pre-orders would eventually be canceled, but not before netting Bezos even more attention for Amazon. When Dean Kamen finally went on Good Morning America in 2002 to unveil it, Diane Sawyer took one look at the scooter and said, quote, "I'm tempted to say, that's it? But that can't be it." Unfortunately, that was it.
I got up early that day to watch that announcement, and I had the exact same reaction.
I want to hear from you now, Tony, because despite having actually read the speculation, I was not so much in the loop that I would have been watching when it was unveiled. What can you tell us about these Halcyon Times?
Well, I knew that there was going to be some sort of vehicle involved because I'd done the research where it showed like some of the patents and things. One where it was like a skateboard with like a single wheel in the middle. Like they had a bunch of different designs that they had patented. So I thought it was going to be that, but they didn't have like the patents out that actually looked like a Segway. So I kept thinking it was going to be like some crazy, like, keep in mind this is me at like 12 or 13 years old. I thought it was going to be like the thing that replaced motorcycles, and it was going to be awesome, and it was going to be like going like 80 miles an hour and all this. I was really dumb at that time. But like whenever I saw it, I was just like, they thought that this would change everything. They thought cities would change with this. I thought it was going to be like a hoverboard or some sort of like something that was just so different that we couldn't even fathom what it would be. And it just turned out to be a scooter.
And despite rumors that would continue to swirl through the internet for years afterward, the Segway really was the device that everyone had gotten so excited about. And you can still go back and see the forums where people are like, I heard that wasn't actually it. I heard he has like a real thing that lives up to everything that's in my head somewhere, and he didn't actually release it. The government banned him from it or something. There's some amazing conspiracy theories.
I had some thoughts like that. I was like, oh, was it supposed to be like some fusion reactor? What was it supposed to be? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I started getting disappointed whenever I saw the original patents, and I thought it would be cool, but I didn't think it would be like that. But whenever it actually came out and I watched that special, I just remember like the disappointment of turning off the TV like 3 or 4 minutes into the presentation of him like just rocking back and forth and like talking to Diet Sawyer and everybody, and just being kind of like feeling sick about it. Like, I was way too into it. It's like whenever I read new technology posts on Reddit or anything like that, and I'm like, oh, I'll believe that whenever it hits the market. It's about that new super battery that's powered off of silver and is going to give you like 3 weeks of charge. It's like, all I hear about is all these like hype things. Whenever it actually hits the market, I'll get excited. It jaded me.
I feel bad for Dean Kamen too, because the Segway has some really cool tech in it. I mean, it is doing things that nobody was doing before. It does advance things in certain ways that I don't know that I would have thought to advance them. Maybe they didn't need to be advanced in that way, but like, you can't look at it and say, well, this is a stupid piece of technology. Like, it's revolutionary in its own way. It's just also only a scooter.
Yeah. And like, I'm sure that this technology is a big part of the reason why like the robots from Boston Dynamics can stand so easily and move so well. It's like, it's an important part of like future inventions, but it just was way too hyped.
Everything that Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos had feared came to pass. People weren't impressed with the design, cities did ban or restrict their use, and worst of all, several high-profile accidents, most notably one that killed the man who later bought the Segway company, damaged the scooter's reputation. Eventually, the piracy would become a problem too. Chinese company iBot started making devices with tech very similar to what Segway was using, and eventually they became more successful and bought up the Segway company. Dean Kamen wasn't stupid for thinking that something like Segway could change the world. Today, different mobility solutions from hoverboards to scooter rentals are making it possible to move in ways no one thought possible 2 decades ago. But nothing could have lived up to the hype that the internet piled onto the fledgling invention. Dean Kamen tried to protect himself by keeping absolute secrecy around his project, but in the end, that secrecy was a double-edged sword. By not letting anyone say anything about the project, he let people fill it with their own ideas, and the Segway could never live up to those.
Yeah, and if there's one thing you could never underestimate, it's the power of internet hype.
Yes.
People will go above and beyond, no matter what it is.
It's interesting that he knew in advance that not keeping this thing secret could sink his product, but he wasn't able to predict the way it would sink his product. And you can really tell in the release video where he's showing it on Good Morning America, he's like, guys, it's just, I'm proud of this thing. I made it. It's cool, but also it's not going to be what you want it to be. And that's a rough place to be in if you're Dean Kamen.
It's like the only thing that would have impressed people is if he walked out there with a jetpack or something like that.
Yeah, even that, people, I mean, those exist, right?
I'm more talking about like a usable one that like could actually like get you to work, not the jetpacks that'll get you like maybe 100 feet, 200 feet.
They have the ones that shoot out of your hands. Have you seen those?
I have not. I've seen the ones that's over water that are supposed to be really fun.
Yeah, they have ones now that is like a pair of turbines or whatever that you strap one pair on your feet and the other pair on your hands, and then you sort of like aim them all down. You can kind of like push yourself.
Iron Man it.
Yeah, kinda. But that is going to do it for this episode of Bad Ideas. I thank you guys so much for listening. It was really cool to be able to research something that I had some sliver of experience with. It's difficult now to understand how exciting something like that could be, knowing that it's going to turn out to be the Segway. But believe me, the hype was real. And
This is one of the few bad ideas I have, like, direct context for.
Yes, apparently Tony was more hyped than me. Something we have in common is we thought that the idea of maybe a teleportation device or a time machine would be legit awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you should click on that like button. Subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/humanechoes, where you can get these a whole week earlier than everybody else. And we will see you guys next time with another episode of Bad Ideas.
Bye, everybody.